Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, doing another video on the recent Final Fantasy XI news. For those of you who missed it, the game's producer, Satohiko Matsui, known more commonly as Matsui P by the community, stepped down from his role as producer, with the game's director, Yoji Fujito, taking over as the game's producer, making him both the director and producer of Final Fantasy XI. Seems Square just likes to find themselves in these kind of situations with their MMOs, huh? Either way, Dengeki and Famitsu did a shared interview with Fujito-san in his new role. And I just want to go over that and see if there's any new details about the future of the game. I've seen a few tweets. Audrey Aitai Komochi on Twitter tweeted about this in the first place. That's how I found out about it. And I'm looking at a read-only version of their digital article. So I'll include both a link to her original tweet as well as the original not read-only version of the article in the description of the video below. Now, I did give it a quick glance over, and a lot of the details seem to be just slightly more detailed things that were mentioned in the original announcement, where both Matsui P, or previously Matsui P, and Fujito both provided a little bit of insight into what this would mean for the future of the game. Now, it first starts with the development, how he became a producer, and these are pieces of news, again, that kind of dictated the start of the introduction of this change, in that Matsui P said he would stay on till the 20th anniversary, and then wasn't really sure what he was going to do after that. He's been thinking about it recently, and it just so happened that Fujito decided to go and approach him about taking over the producer role, especially because I guess he was reaching approximately retirement age, and he was worried that he would have to retire in the middle of something big. So he just wanted to make sure he had both the roles completely solidified for the sake of the future of the game. So he just said, you know, hey, if you want, I'll take over, and, you know, we'll just go from there. So yes, here he confirms this was something we weren't entirely sure about when he said he was taking over the role of producer, is that would he be both director and producer, or would they find somebody else in order to take over that role? Originally, they considered having someone take over as director so he could take over the producer role, but because the development team is so small, figured it was better to just make sure that the people who are focused on developing for the game still could continue to do that, as opposed to being brought into the director role and thus kind of almost shrinking the number of people who could actively work on the game or who were actively developing, to put them, I could put them in a role of more responsibility without them actively working on it. So yes, Fujito will be both the director and producer for Final Fantasy XI for the foreseeable future. He actually says it's not that big of a deal. He doesn't think it's going to be any different, really. You know, Matsui P was at the forefront as a producer, he says, but basically all the preparation, negotiations were already done as a team. So now he's just in the position of taking responsibility as a producer if something happens. You know, any producer related roles, you know, fall back on him. But he just says that he doesn't think it's going to be that much different. It's going to be pretty much the same as before, as it says right at the top of this. He's just going to carry it all on his shoulders. Mentally, you don't think there will be any major changes? He's like, I'd like to think of... So this sentence is weird. It translates kind of weird. I like to think of Fujito. Actually, you won't know until you start working on various things. Essentially just saying he doesn't think it, but he won't know until, you know, he's fully into the role. Coincidentally, the first producer, Mr. Tanaka, Hiromochi Tanaka, who is responsible a lot for Final Fantasy XIV 1.0, bravely retired at the 10-year anniversary in 2012. So it's, you know, pretty close. You know, it was almost 10 years. It was about 2 years after his appointment. Yeah, I guess actually it kind of coincides with about the time 10th anniversary, 20th anniversary. It doesn't really work out entirely. 10 years is also a guideline for a generation and era to change. May have been just the right opportunity to think of something new. Yeah, that's pretty fair. Did you report this change to Mr. Tanaka? It was launched by Mr. Tanaka, so I think it'd be disrespectful if someone who did not know anything at all suddenly took over as producer, and I reported that properly. So yeah, they reached out to him and told him that they were making the change, just as a matter of respect, because it is his original project that he was the producer on. Your appointment as new producer, have there been any changes to the structure of the project? So we got, again, some insight into this from the initial announcement. Current staff have been with the 11 development team for a long time, but when it comes to growing their careers, I think a part of them will lose opportunities if they work solely on Final Fantasy XI. For example, when creating a single game title, we can carry out a series of processes from the launch of the project to the construction, mass production of content, stories, and the release version under the latest technology. Seeing deliverables shipped as products while coming into contact with new technologies is great motivation for me as a producer, and by accumulating them, it is also an opportunity for me to grow as a developer. They say it's a so-called career path of human resources. On one hand, Final Fantasy XI as it is currently can only be evaluated when there's no major breaks, such as we have implemented new content, which has increased the number of players by this much. Also, it is absolutely not the case that the development staff of 11, who've been working only in the midst of 20 years of withered technology, will be able to continue as they are for the next 10 to 20 years. Yeah, the withered technology is a #1 point that comes up quite a few times here and will continue to come up. It is very difficult for them to actually develop things nowadays. There's actually a pretty interesting story that comes a little bit later in here, but don't be surprised to hear that brought up. We know they were working on virtual machines for their development, for their development process to make things a little bit smoother. And given one of the things they say that happens here, Fujito says that happens here, I don't blame them, and I didn't blame them in the first place. So while the staff's thinking is flexible, we'd like them to experience various things. Yeah, so people on the 11 development team, he is encouraging them to take on other projects alongside 11 and then learn things and then bring what they learned back to Final Fantasy 11 itself. There will be fewer staff members who will focus on 11 only, but we expect that some staff will work concurrently with other departments or be transferred to other departments for study. He essentially just says, listen, just because we're working on 11 doesn't mean you should your career should be locked into developing PS2 era games and MMOs on a PC with just this old stuff. If they're not allowed to grow and think, they can't ever get better. And so there's a chance that they come back and they've learned something, and even with the technology they have to develop on, they can bring that experience into the team. We'll see how that actually ends up working out, because I think the thought of that is more practical when you're looking at developing amongst modern games. But again, what they learn and what they are able to achieve with other games and then coming back to old technology, there's only so much you can realistically do. But if they are improving their development process and the hardware with the virtual machines, that should, to some degree, alleviate it. But we'll see. The number of returning players in 2022 increased significantly, and the Grabble collaboration also received a great response. That's actually Grand Blue. I didn't even remember that. I think I saw a few tweets, and I think I saw it in my Discord. But yes, there's a Grand Blue and Final Fantasy XI collaboration. I've seen some of the art from some of the characters. A lot of the main heroines, Shantoto, Prish, Lillicet, Iroha, pretty much all the most major ones kind of make an appearance over there, plus a handful of other characters as well. But I haven't seen much of it myself. Don't know that I'll be checking it out just because I don't really play Grand Blue. But all the same, pretty cool. I think around the 18th anniversary, Matsui said he would continue 11 till the 20th. In response, we've been thinking for a long time, we will make the 20th as exciting as possible. So they launched the We Are Vanadil site, which has a ton of great insight and interviews, by the way, and published interview articles and video contents based on it. In addition, a new story, Embryo of the Erosion World, the Voracious Resurgence, as we call it over here in the States, was implemented in the base game, planned to complete the story within the 20th anniversary. They didn't make it, and I'm not really surprised. I don't think anyone's surprised that they didn't finish it by the 20th anniversary. We're now approaching the 21st anniversary this coming May, and that is when it is supposed to officially be finished. I have played 7, 8 chapters of it. It's pretty good. It's definitely more than I would have expected, given how much they talk about the struggles and the difficulties and the technology. Some really great new music as well. So it's a little weird to try to get into, and it has very odd pacing, especially if you were to do it as it was released. But nonetheless, they did a pretty good job. They've been doing a pretty good job with it, and hopefully by the end, I'll still be saying that. Let's see. As a result, these projects did the increase in the number of players have any impact? Yes, the number of players really increased, and also the Grand Blue Fantasy collaboration proposed by Psy Games was very significant. My impression is that our voices have reached out even outside the range we used to hear aloud. For those who have played 11 in the past, things like Chains of Promethea and Abyssi, Prish, the heroine of Final Fantasy. She's not the heroine of all Final Fantasy 11. She's the heroine of a couple of stories, but she is one of the more adored protagonists amongst Final Fantasy XI fans. And there were many voices from former players who learned saying, wait, Final Fantasy XI's still around? I feel like every time anything 11 news related happens, there's at least one person who goes, oh, I didn't know they were still doing anything for that game. I think there were a lot of people who thought if it's the 20th anniversary, let's go back to Vanadil. In fact, the month after the collaboration, the number of players who returned was very high. The number of simultaneous connections was at an unprecedented level. Grand Blue is pretty popular. So I'm not really that surprised. But I mean, it's also helped that people just talk about 11 still existing. So anytime they do anything, it kind of goes goes in circles around people who just are reading or catch a glimpse of it from one person or the other. It's funny that a game, I guess it's actually not that funny or surprising. You know, a game as old as Final Fantasy XI. I mean, I'm sitting here making a video about this interview right now. And while I don't miss Classic 11, and I make sure to reiterate that a lot, I would be wrong to say it didn't have a significant impact in my choice of MMO at the point of my life today. So I think social has really helped some of these older games that have kind of I guess this kind of reach or influence, I suppose, on the people who have played it. And when they talk about news or something new, it reminds people that it's still there, and then they want to check it out. So, you know, I shouldn't be that surprised. I mean, a lot of old school MMOs have kind of survived on that similar principle, or have continued to thrive on a similar principle. So I guess it's not really that surprising. 11 aims to create a more stable and secure playing environment. So playing environment is not a developing environment. That means it's for stuff for the players to do. They have made a lot of improvements. The reinstall process now is much, much quicker, although I think they could update it again. Same method that they're currently using now, but update the base files that are available. Essentially, you download almost like an official torrent of the game files off of the website now. And that makes it so that the amount of patching you need to do is lower. Play Online is pretty throttled when it comes to the amount of update speed that it can achieve. And so even if you have a really good connection, it can be agonizingly slow. And if you have a worse connection, it can be agonizingly slower. So that initial download basically puts a lot more of the base files onto the game, but I don't think they've updated it as of late. So they could probably do it doing some of that. They've also added a ton of new things. Even just this last February, they added chat filters that help a ton, especially if you play on Asura in North America. Oh boy. So every month, for the plans for the future, every month they update the Eminence records. Those are just like, you know, daily, weekly, monthly quests that you do. Ambuscade, it's, you know, daily. It's monthly content that you can... that changes. It's just a battlefield that has a few specific rules, and you can challenge it on multiple difficulties. That's going to continue. They're not going to stop updating those. Regarding the content of the version upgrade, it is difficult to continue adding new content one after the other under the current system. On the other hand, in the future, we would like to guarantee the stability of 11 and the ability to play without problems in various PC environments for each player. We'll be focused on working on those parts. Now, other than a few basic things, that makes it sound like they want to update the game to work on modern hardware, but I don't think that's what they're actually trying to achieve. I think they just want players to feel secure and safe while playing their game. The game has become a lot more, how do I put it, accessible in terms of chat, in terms of visibility of things, and that's led to people who are unsavory being much more in the face of everybody that doesn't want to see what they have to say, especially on Asura. On most servers, it's fairly quiet, but on the more populated servers like Asura, it can get pretty obnoxious. So I feel like they mean more that, and that especially comes into mind with the feature they added back in February. They also say that up until now, they focused on enjoying content and providing new content, but in the future, they'd like to think about livening up the community aspect. For example, like to run regular seasonal events, screenshot campaigns, and even out-of-game events on a larger scale. I'd be shocked to see those leave Japan, but all the same. Now, run regular seasonal events. They do actually do some seasonal events, but they are actually speaking more in the terms of seasonal events like they were in the mid-2000s for Final Fantasy XI. We are looking for ways to complete this content by the world so far so that we can get some kind of reward for it. So everyone in the world can cooperate and aim to clear towards one big goal. It's a rather fluffy way of saying it, but I think we will be able to solidify the plan and talk about the specifics around May or June. Now, they have done this in the past with Final Fantasy XI. They would have individual servers have to achieve certain things during seasonal events. Most notably is one of their first seasonal events, which I believe had each server challenging an incredibly powerful Treant boss. I think it was a Treant. And every server that successfully defeated it, and by the way, everyone and their mother could attack it. It wasn't like you needed to have a party of 6 and it was like down to like the high level players. It was just this massively powerful thing. But any server that defeated it actually got access to outpost teleports, which is another means of getting around the server. They eventually just gave that to every server for any of the servers that didn't complete it. And I'm pretty sure there were ones that didn't complete it. So they kind of abandoned that idea, but they want to kind of return to that idea. Do you think domain versioning has been further developed? It's an early conquest or Visage winning streak, but the point is that we want to create a movement amongst players. If we can create excitement among players as a result of these projects, we hope to sublimate it with a real fan event. When it comes to cooperation, worried about the difference in numbers of players in each world. Yeah, so he even brings it up. Asura is where most players in North America go. So it would be easier to achieve a cumulative score there. So they're thinking like the sum value of all worlds. So that way, if you're on Asura, you're still helping all those other lower pop servers as well. And that is, I think, the only way to do an event like that. I don't think anything else works. Will they be continuing the broadcast shows, the Vanadil show, as well as the Final Fantasy XI Digest, which essentially is just the Vanadil show? It's not called Mogi Vanadil. It's I forget what it's called, but it's just a live broadcast they do in Japanese, and then they usually provide like an English translation of it. Those are undecided. They're going to do one for May. They're going to do one for November. Those are the two next anniversaries of the game. The 21st anniversary of the PlayStation 2 version in May, and the 21st anniversary of the PC edition in November. After that, it's undecided, but they'll probably continue to do something in the future. I'd like to focus on reflecting requests that support the comfort of play, so quality of life, essentially. We've received many requests to deal with harassment and misconduct, and we would like to take measures to deal with them as much as possible. As part of this project, the term filter was a project that came from the development stage and said, I want to make something like this. Yeah, you can filter things out like spam and advertisements and harassment way easier now. And honestly, long time overdue, but I'm glad they decided to do it all the same. But those are the things. So they are looking into quality of life for the players based on the game's current state. You know, things that make sense for the way Final Fantasy XI is now, or the way that it is handled now. Some parts, you know, you can't know how effective it will be until you make it, so we didn't talk about it much beforehand. Moreover, due to the specifications, the user has to prepare the file and set to filter contents by themselves, so I'm sorry if this has become a function to select people. Yeah, so in other words, it's still kind of a pain to use, but if you do use it, it is useful. We have implemented functions for these measures. For future implementations, we would like to continue to work on them to make them easier to use. Yeah, Final Fantasy XI is always it's in the game, it's horrible to use, and then they kind of get around to it eventually. It's surprising whenever they do, especially with the resources they have now, but it is appreciated, and I will definitely be using said features when I go back as part of my count up ahead of 16. The final battle of Voracious Resurgence is a new field, and there will also be new master trials. We had heard about the new master trials. These are basically, if you're a 14 player watching, they're like ultimate level encounters, and they provide glam weapons exclusively, but there's a lot of weapon types that don't have master trial weapons. So there's very, very few of them, and they only work for certain jobs. So mentioned a little bit in the latest broadcast, the first part of the 2F series. So the first part of the second of it's a two-part series is what it's trying to say. The first half of the finale was in March, and the second part will be in May, and that is the end of the Voracious Resurgence. They're working towards the end, so I expect it to be quite good. The final battle, I wanted to do it in a new way that was different from the past, so I've been creating a battlefield for that purpose for 2 years. Yeah. Now, when they say a new field, they actually don't mean like a boss arena. They mean a brand new area. Now, the last one of those that they added was Raizenjima for the Rhapsodies of Vanadil. Very simple area. It's very much about the ambiance, the music, but it has endgame activities present there, and it is used to facilitate the finale of Rhapsodies of Vanadil. And it seems that's what they want to achieve here as well. They also had the composer, Naoshi Mizuta, who is fantastic. They've done a ton of great tracks. Has finished recording. You'll be able to listen to this new battle song and ending song when it launches in May. Now, I guess actually, when they say new field and battlefield, so it sounds like it's a little bit of both. It sounds like this is specifically for the final boss, and also the final battle itself has its own particular battlefield. But I know that when they're talking about field areas, they talk about, yeah, this is the first time a new area has been created since Raizenjima in Rhapsodies of Vanadil. Uclan Island itself was built many years ago, and the staff who worked on it at the time have now moved to other development teams, but they asked them to come back and help us develop. Yeah, so they actually brought back devs who had left the team to help with this. So we're still at the company, so that's always good to see. The development equipment was also reassembled from scratch and used for this content, scheduled to be released in December and had to be postponed by 1 month. It was directly caused by equipment breaking down in the middle of work. It's an old piece of equipment, so it took a long time to order another one. Apologize for this inconvenience. Now the resources themselves have been assembled. It's okay if the equipment breaks. I don't think it's ever okay if the equipment breaks. I mean, but that's, again, that's what they're struggling with. Their equipment for developing for this game is just too old. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's difficult to provide new content on a regular basis, and the aging equipment is a major factor. Even if you say the development equipment is broken, let's replace it, there's a possibility the replacement equipment is broken, and you won't know until you actually use it. Given the situation, we had to decide it would be difficult to create a stable development environment to provide new content in the future. We, again, know they were working on those virtual machines, so hopefully that ends up bearing them some fruit. I think some players may feel a little uneasy about the future of the game. However, I have the desire to do something new, and above all, I never leave 11 unattended. I think you can feel this from the version upgrades that will be held every month in the future. We know that those are going to slow down. Like they said, there's going to be not a whole lot for a while the dev team kind of splits themselves around and gets more experience, but still has plans for... He mentioned this before. He has plans to chill for a bit, but to fix things up, to make sure they have a proper development environment that will support it for the mid and long term. Again, not thinking about shutting the game down anytime soon. Then on top of endgame content, are there any is there any additional elements to existing content? There are two types of end content that can be called Odysseys, Chalgare, and sorry. Okay, so the translations here get very hard to find. So it's Veng 25 will be the final form from the beginning. Yeah, this is where Google Translate doesn't really do its job. So Sortie is something they added more recently. It's used as part of the upgrade system for the Prime weapons, which are their most recent sort of big weapon upgrades. Old school players know relic weapons, mythic weapons, things like that. Prime weapons are, you know, upgraded via these means through Sortie as well as the new stuff. This starts by clearing Embryo. So once you clear Voracious Resurgence, then you'll be able to continue on with this. In the future, in addition to strengthening your Empyrean outfits, they have added Empyrean stuff recently, and acquiring job-specific head equipment, we hope that you will also go to Sortie to strengthen your Prime weapon. Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to. Any new content plan after the completion of it. Once it's completed, you'll be able to strengthen your Prime weapon, but even if you go through the trouble of making it, it'll be meaningless if you don't have a place to use it. That said, I think new content will test the power of the Prime weapon, will become an essential part of future play. So we're planning some new Master Trials. Again, these are ultimate level trials equivalent for Final Fantasy XIV. And they mention here that, you know, there's special weapons that glow white. And there's just, you know, in addition to the weapon types such as the two-handed sword that have been implemented, there are some that have not yet been implemented, and we plan to make them available in the new Master Trial. So yeah, if you take on those final challenges, there will be more types of weapons available for Glam. Or as they call, you know, it's not called Glam there, I'm just used to calling it from 14. The Mog Wardrobe. As mentioned above, the new Master Trial is also meant to be a place to test the power of the Prime weapon, so I think it'll be much more difficult than the previous one. So, man, I gotta check out these Prime weapons and see how much better they are, because they're making it seem like they're way better than the old Remas, which is shocking, because the old Remas are insanely powerful. So I feel like he's just hyping up Prime. I don't think I don't read this as, oh, the Prime weapons are just that much better. But they needed to make something that we're like, oh, you know, this Prime weapon is best for my, you know, job, for damage, or for whatever. And the Master Trial is a place that's specifically good to use the Prime weapon. But it's not like they're going to make the Mythics not good, or, well, most of the Relics aren't very good. And, you know, it's just the other Remas, all the other weapons that we have. So I just don't see those not being useful anymore, especially some of them, especially like the Bard stuff and whatnot. In terms of strengthening the Prime weapon to the final stage, will it be necessary to clear Voracious Resurgence? Yes. After that, you can upgrade it at your own pace. If you're an early person, you may be able to complete one by the end of the year. By the end of the year, I mean, it'll take like 6 months. He said people may finish it sooner. The big thing is that the content you need to do for it is Sorties, which can only be entered once every 20 hours. So you can't, you know, it's not like you can speed it up. And there's a lot of people queuing for it, a lot of congestion. Even though they are updating the processing method for the waiting line, and the waiting time is shorter, no matter how you squeeze it, it's 20 hours between them. So I mean, that's the limit. He thinks he's gonna make it. That's still a lot though. But that's the kind of thing Final Fantasy 11 players kind of into. Like, oh, I'll log in and do my sortie for the day, and I'll work on my prime weapon, and maybe I'll go do this. And it's just about creating options or opportunities, especially for players who have already been playing for a long time. The process of strengthening is going to be quite challenging. That's right. In line with the current playstyle, we've made it possible to steadily improve it solo. Yes, you can do sorties solo. The final stage of strengthening may seem a little harsh. If you strengthen your prime weapon to the final stage, you will have a so-called moya moya. Now, I don't know what that means, so I'm going to moya moya. Well, apparently it's a progressive blood vessel disorder where the carotid artery in the skull is blocked or narrowed. So I don't think that's what he means. Although that does sound pretty accurate for some of the things that Final Fantasy XI asks you to do. I couldn't have planned that one any better. I didn't Google that ahead of this. So, all right. Well, you'll get a blood vessel disorder. That's, oh man. Okay. Anyway, moving on. Aspirations is a new producer and a message to adventurers. Okay, for Final Fantasy XI, I think about the project goals for the new year every year. I also set personal goals as a new producer. I want to preserve 11 in some way. Here we go. This is what I saw the tweet about initially. In today's world, online games, whether it be smartphone games, PC games, home video games, have become mainstream, but there are many cases where nothing is left when service ends. Tentatively, I don't want the title Final Fantasy XI, which celebrated its 20th anniversary and attracted a lot of people, to end someday in the future and only memories remain. I would like to keep a record of how the characters who existed in Vana'diel moved and what kind of atmosphere they were playing at the time in any form. In that, so in this, do you plan a special website? As part of this, you plan the We Are Vana'diel website. Yes, in that sense, We Are Vana'diel is, so to speak, the trajectory of 11 seen from the outside of the game. But that's not all. But for me, it's more of a record from the inside, starting with what kind of game it was, what kind of world it was, and what kind of system it was used. We want to aim for the ultimate goal that Final Fantasy XI will remain in the form of a game, even if it becomes a different title, meaning no longer the MMO. Of course, it takes a huge amount of time and effort to get there, so we are now thinking of leaving various materials firmly in shape. Now, the more direct translation states that they are preserving assets, according to Audrey at Aitai Kamochi on Twitter, which means that if they're so a couple things. One, if they're preserving assets, then it doesn't necessarily mean like a single player 11 is on the way. What they don't want to do is not have these things and not be able to produce something with them in the form of a single player game in the future if need be. So they are making efforts to ensure that the game is immortalized in some way. And that's not really much a surprise. In case you didn't know, Final Fantasy XI can largely be beaten solo now, at least if you only want to do the story content. Now, they did mention being able to do the prime weapon solo there. There's quite a lot of difficult instances in that of the later sections of the Voracious Resurgence, and the end of Rhapsodies can get people a lot as well. That being said, the game itself already kind of facilitates this idea, so if they were to do it on a more official capacity and make a single player 11, I'd be totally down. I'm of the opinion that instead of just making 11 kind of as is, even if they were to preserve assets, I would like to see 11 remade as a single player game in the vein of Final Fantasy 12. Final Fantasy 12 in a lot of ways is a single player Final Fantasy 11. It doesn't always feel that way or seem that way on the surface, but you can see a lot of the things, a lot of the similarities that it shares. And then 14, of course, borrows a lot of those things because it was essentially a single player MMO. If I could play Final Fantasy 11 in the style of Final Fantasy 12 as a longtime fan, I think that would be a considerably awesome thing. I also think you could go a more traditional turn-based route with 11 assets, given it's an older game, and it wouldn't really feel like a leap back in technology. I don't think it's completely out of the realm, but I don't think that's what they'll do. I think they will just in some way allow players to play the game in a completely single player format, whatever that actually ends up meaning, if it were to ever end service. Now, as a final message to the adventurers, I may have said something that makes me feel uneasy that 11 is scheduled to end its service soon, but that's not the case at all. This year, we are planning to replace the server, the aging server, with a new one. And if the service was about to end, we would not have a new producer in the first place. As for the Prime weapon, it will take years to complete for some people. It would be terrible to terminate the service in that situation. Therefore, we have been preparing and laying the groundwork for maintaining a stable environment so more people can... Okay, the Google Translate's not great there. So that people can suck Vanadier. Oh, okay. I'm gonna move on. We hope that you will consider this change in the system as a measure to continue the Final Fantasy XI service and not to terminate. So please continue to enjoy 11 in the future. And that is the end of the interview with Famitsu. What a way! I mean, quite literally, I guess a happy ending. All right, never mind. We're gonna move past that. Either way, that is what the now producer and director, Mr. Fujito-san, has to say about the current state and future of Final Fantasy XI and plans to immortalize it one day if it were to somehow stop service. But for now, they say the numbers are up, everything's looking good, and they're going to focus on finishing their latest story edition, the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel. With that, I'm going to wrap up this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And hey, if you wanted to check out retail Final Fantasy XI, I will be streaming it sometime in the next week or so, with the minimum goal planned of getting through the base game, as well as Rise of Xylar and Chains of Promethea, potentially more than that, but you'll just have to tune into my stream. Right now, I'm working through Final Fantasy X-2, and 11 comes right after that. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section of the video below, and I will see you in the next video. Until then, take care.